Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a trauma-informed therapist, life coach and disruptor of wellness norms based in Brighton, UK. This isn't another nice-to-have wellness podcast. Instead, this podcast seeks to redefine what it means to be well in today's world. Here, we challenge the status quo, seek to reunite wellness with social justice and improve accessibility, diversity and inclusivity within wellness and beyond. As a listener, you are not here to passively consume. Instead, you are an ambassador for real, embodied, societal and systemic change in the world. As your host, I stand for radical self-inquiry and being able to have those confronting but necessary conversations so that we can remember our collective humanity at this time. We're here for the revolution and you've got a front row seat. Khalid, thank you so much for joining this morning. It's a real pleasure to have you in the space and to have a conversation with you this morning. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So just a question to you of, firstly, how are you? And how are you arriving into the space today?
Yes, I just received news, sadly, that Dodi, the wonderful actor who played my father in the Kite Runner, passed away last night. And yeah, we just had a discussion as to whether to postpone this. And then I actually thought, you know what, let's bring this all in. Like, such an extraordinary soul who left such an imprint and who'd left such an imprint on my life. And and I'm just absorbing that. And I guess in relation to what I assume will be the breadth of our conversation, it just goes to show you what one soul is.
Yeah.
And I think at some level that's what made me go, you know what, no, let's go with it. He's the only and he's the first person. I've had the honour of two men play my father in film. And it's a very particular thing when that happens. And he was the first. And in Arabic, you call your father Baba, but it's Bob. And it was always that joke between us that I had my Baba, but he was my Baba. Yeah. So I'm arriving with that. I hope the kind of vulnerability of this episode or this conversation takes us places that aren't all, or I don't want to, I'm arriving with that. It's hard to move on from it at some level.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm also arriving with it amidst what this moment also more broadly is in relation to what I am unable to call a ceasefire, Gaza. At best, I can call it a de-escalation of bombardment. As far as I know, over 241 people have been killed since they called the ceasefire. To put that in context, I think 251 hostages were taken on October 7th. And this pain, really, of what feels like facing down a moment in which the powers that be are attempting to return to some version of normal in which we pretend that the genocide never happened. And for me, I think one of the reasons as well that the word ceasefire sticks in everyone's throats is that under normal circumstances, a ceasefire is something in which warring parties that were at peace before return to a peace after war. Whereas in Palestine, you start with an occupation, you start with apartheid and 77 years of Nakba, and you return to what was on October the 6th, 2023, yesterday's nightmare. 60 million tons of rubble, whatever it is, 150,000 tons of bombs having been dropped. And the trauma of that and what it leaves in people's bodies and the soil. And there's something very particular, I think, about this moment, about what it says about all of us and what it means to reckon with all of that. Yeah. So, as usual with Khalid, how are you doing arrives as a question which is boom. That's where I am. But what a soul. What a beautiful soul. And yeah.
Before we go on, I'd so appreciate you to hit follow or subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, click those 3 little dots next to settings to rate the show. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review or take a moment to explore how you can rate or review on the platform that you're listening or watching. This makes a difference. I truly believe we need to have more of these conversations to shake up the status quo. We'll beat the algorithm together with your clicks and shares. Now back to the episode. In your Instagram bio, which I know is an impossible way to describe ourselves as whole multifaceted humans, literally in 3 sentences, you describe yourself as actor in many things, struggling for a better world, known by some for my roles in film and The Crown, known by others for what joins the dots. And I wanted to ask you to speak to that today, and I'm sure that so much of what you've just shared already speaks to that, but what that means for you today, holding so many aspects of yourself and so many parts of yourself within your work and your personal life. Could you speak to that?
What joins the dots has become clearer on my Instagram profile than anything else previously, insofar as what really joins the dots is what I care about in the world politically, and how that affects the ways in which I'm plural creatively, and the ways in which that creates a kind of restlessness as you are searching for different forms, you're searching for different collaborations, you're searching for different people, different allies with whom you can struggle towards a better world. I am an Arab actor. I'm an actor of Arab descent who graduated from university in 2003, the year of the war in Iraq, when 9/11 happened. My first film was about 9/11, in which I played the lead hijacker. My second film was about Afghanistan, The Kite Runner, which is very deeply on my mind. Just spoke to Mark, the director, this morning after hearing news of Humayun's passing. And then the film after that was about Iraq. And then the films after that were about Egypt and my presence in the revolution, and Egypt before and Egypt during. And then another film about Iraq. And now, of course, I'm known most currently for Dodi, for playing the role of Dodi, who the season with me and with Dodi and Diana came out during the genocide. And at that point, I hadn't realized until that point that he was really one of the few or the first Arab characters I could think of in the history of film on this side of the world who you get to know and love, not fear. And so when he dies, you mourn him. And it took the context of this genocide for that to really hit me, because I'd understood how much of a cultural opportunity it was and how much it's important in the work that we did. And it's funny, whenever I used to say that as well, the thing that would stick in my mind is I'd actually think about Humayun, who of course didn't play an Arab, he played an Afghan. He was a character he's Iranian, but he played an Afghan. And I guess in some people's minds we're lumped together as, broadly speaking, Middle Eastern, right? Even though there are vast differences. But he was one of the other characters who I could think of in the history of film, who you get to know and love, and so when they die, you mourn them. And as an actor of this descent, you don't get to just sit back, and not that anyone does, but you don't get to sit back culturally. You are constantly vigilant and alert as to the ways in which your misrepresentation in the broader culture can be matched by how your culture is misrepresented in film. Yeah. Or for any other media, and you don't want to be complicit in that. And so, on the one side, what I do is I find spaces in which I can negotiate in a way that I find and I'm deeply proud of, but that it is always a lot of work, while at the same time recognizing that you can't do it all through film or theatre or whatever it may be. And there come moments in your life, as came for me, where you have to be at the barricades I'm from a family of political prisoners. My father and grandfather were both political prisoners. I have a deep relationship with the left in Egypt. I have friends, many of whom have been political prisoners or were for a very long time, some recently released, whose campaign I was a big part of. Out of that springs a kind of multiplicity. And then with that multiplicity, especially when you, sometimes I think it's like a product of the revolution and my experience of it, and this sense of other worlds being possible, that you get to live for a period of time. And what also happens, I think everyone's had a version of it, especially who's been at the barricades over these last 2 years fighting this genocide. Out of these kinds of political ruptures come new alignments, both personally and collectively. And you find other people, and other people find you. And that, for me, this is a very long answer to your question. But part of it came really as well for me from when I started to absorb the counter-revolution in Egypt. So after the moment of revolution and rupture, when a world that everyone had said was impossible was possible, and we were all there and fighting for it, and then comes the deep, dark oppression, and the counter-revolution. In a way that sort of I can't help but feel like patterns despite the differences. After rupture, there are moments which are like a counter-revolution where the power tries to push things away and pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
I went through a period for the Egyptian revolution where on the one side I tried as deeply as I could to understand what had just happened by reading, by speaking, by deeply reflecting in every way I could. And out of that, for me, came this question of a relationship with the possible and the impossible. And even tracing in my life territories which I had told myself, things which were very intimate to me that I thought were impossible. And then I was going, what happens if I start thinking of them as possible? And from that as well came like a creative exploration that took me into other territories. As I think I recently released a song in the process of this last year. Yeah. Which is something I never imagined I would do. And that traces back weirdly to that time when I started to go, I wonder if that part of me that I'd amputated, what would happen if I gently returned to it? And not to bang on about the revolution, but one of the things as well that happens, or happened for me anyway, is I started to understand form creatively as something which has a relationship with the political moment that you're facing. If you work in film, there is a moment in which, as I had during the revolution, or has happened over these last years, where you can literally capture an image or a video of something that happens in the world, clip the beginning, clip the end, and just put it out into the world, and it says everything you want it to say. And that, at some level, and that's the sort of and then there's this time when long-form documentary steps in, and then there's this time when you can't film what you want to see just by being there. You enter the world of fiction, and you have to recreate the stories in order to be able to tell them. And it's likewise the way I feel with music and with other art forms, and there come a moment when writing is one of the most important things to be doing because of its relationship with the depth of reflection and its relationship with what's seen and what's not seen and how to make it seen. And in that restlessness that I have, as I try to live in relation to the moments the world has put in front of all of us, and I live with a particular intimacy because of my background and my relationship with it and my family history, and that's why there's no thing I find it hard to settle one definition.
No,
there we go.
Thank you.
You're gonna get 2 questions out of me by the time we finish.
I'm over it. There was another podcast that I listened to you on, and I remember the interviewer said, just want to ask you quickly, and you were like, quick, I don't really do quickly.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know
like,
how.
right,
I'm like, it's like quick fire rounds. Oh my God.
How long do you have? The 6-hour quick fire round.
Exactly.
That'll be a different podcast series. No, but anyway, thank you for sharing that. That answer was so rich, and it's so interesting to hear you speak about how you see artistry and how you experience artistry. Because I feel like over the past couple of years, there has been so much discussion about the role of public figures at this time, the role of artists at this time in speaking out, in calling our attention to injustice, and people who have really stepped in to that and seeing a responsibility for themselves as artists, as storytellers, as creators, to draw attention to the things that are happening in the times through which we're living. And then people who really have not seen it as their responsibility. And I feel like we're living in this space where either we have art which is so rich in, like, imbued with the times through which we're living, and then art which is just so removed, which just takes us out of the reality from which we're living. And I'm interested how that has been for you, being a public figure over especially the last couple of years. And I know that your Palestine solidarity is in a continuum. I know that you've been to Palestine on multiple occasions, but in the last couple of years, you've been very visible, very vocal, you've spoken, you've organised events. And I'm curious how that has been for you, how you feel that responsibility of artists and art versus entertainment, how that sits for you these days.
It's moved and changed a lot over the course of these 2 years. As I said, right from the very first film I made, or all of my work, it has related to a political responsibility that I feel around my identity. At the very beginning of this genocide, it was a very lonely experience to step out and step up. And we've travelled from that time through to this moment more recently, where over 5,000 people had signed the Film Workers Pledge. Yeah. We had the huge event at Wembley Arena, people all over the globe, from dock workers to people in every walk of life. Yeah. Participating. And the journey of that has been quite something. The Crown premiere in Los Angeles, where I stepped out with the word "ceasefire now" on my hand, where I was one of the very first, if not the first, I don't really know, to step out and do that. And the reason it was one of the first was because there'd been the writer's strike, and so it was literally one of the very first premieres. But I believe I was one of the only Arab actors in the world put in the position of, what are you going to do as you step out onto a red carpet? And as you say, I'm someone who's been to Palestine. And even if I hadn't, but my first protest was on my mother's shoulders when I was 3 for Palestine. And I recognize the way in which the injustice, the intergenerational injustice in Palestine, is entirely woven into so many of the crises that we face in the world, and that I face, that are related to my identity, right? And my Arabness. So there was no way that I couldn't step out there and make that gesture of solidarity to crack open the veneer of everything is normal. And what was extraordinary about that experience, and remains extraordinary, is there was the question, will the world cave in on me, or will I find some other space of possibility and hope? And what I found was a space of possibility and hope and solidarity. What I found is that, and I said this many times, but the circles of solidarity around me were far bigger than I thought they were. And for me, the proof that I was right in feeling that is this moment that we're in now. And I started to feel that. And speaking very openly, I felt that part of my responsibility at that time was to show and find a way to show that it can be safe to express this solidarity. Yeah. And that there is a language to be found that finds its way through what appears culturally thorny and is culturally thorny, despite the fact that I wrote a simple song, right? Despite the fact that there are things that are, I believe, not complex about it, that are simple. The scale of injustice has things about it that are very clear and do not require a PhD. Yeah. And the world has come to see that and understand that, right? But those of us who've been close to it have understood that for for a long time. And I felt throughout that whole time that you have to hold a warm space for people to be able to take their journeys towards joining. Because if you shout at people for not joining, or if you shout at people once they join for being late, it discourages others from doing so.
Yeah, or not joining in the right way.
Shame is, I've learned that shame is where it might have its place. I've learned that it's not useful in the length that is as an affect. It's not useful in the length of trying to build a movement. It has its place, but it can really damage your ability to grow.
Yeah.
And I learned that at some level from some of my Egyptian revolutionary experience. And I won't pretend that it's not hard to not hold back some of the rage and anger and legitimate that you feel. Nor will I pretend that it's not hard. When I wrote the words "never again" on my hands, because each time then I would try to understand, okay, I've gone to this boundary, what's the next place that I need to go? As the world around me was moving, like by the next time, or a bit later, it was January and the ICJ ruling had come out. And we were stepping towards the beginning of the acceptance of this word genocide. And it's crazy to think that from January 2024, where that word was not, at which point I can't remember, I think we were under 20,000. And you think that it took until people couldn't deny that a man-made famine was taking place for it to completely tip amongst people. It had already tipped amongst the experts and the human rights organizations around the world and inside Israel. But for everyone else who, for some reason, is holding on to their own feeling, it took until then. And beyond, we do have a particular responsibility if we have a platform to use it. I do think that's true. But I can't remember what I was going to say. But beyond people who have a platform, I think there's, the collective responsibility to walk towards all of this. Yeah, I was going to say something else, but it's gone. It will come back.
We'll come back.
A long answer again. Damn it.
No, it's all good. I'm here for it. I'm curious for you how it's been in an industry where there has been, in many ways, a lot of silence. I hear what you're saying, that there's now a lot more people being vocal, signing campaigns, signing petitions, and being visible. Has that been challenging for you over the last couple of years of silence in lots of spaces where you might have hoped for more? Or how has that been for you?
Yeah, no, and I think that was more or less where I was going in, where I lost my thread, is yes, it has been challenging. And part of the reason it's challenging, frankly, more importantly than my industry, because I don't think there's any industry that is exemplary on this account at all. I think there are some industries that have more of a spotlight on them because of the platform. And what's more challenging about it is what it says about the culture in which I've grown up, in which I'm part.
Yeah.
The voice that I speak with and think it was carrying if you couldn't see my face. What's deeply challenging for me about it is, it's inside that is an understanding of the ways in which many parts of you have to hide.
Yeah.
And the histories of where that sits in culturally, politically, personally. I'm sure also, I don't know who's watching, but I'm sure all sorts of people of different backgrounds will understand the depths of that hiding. And at some level, what this moment does is confirm the violence, the reasons why you might have been right to hide.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, you reach a moment with a genocide in which the value of that hiding becomes that there is none anymore. You've crossed the line. That's it. What more do we have to lose? And so you push the step over into the risks that or the seeming risks that are necessary. And then what's beautiful about that in equal measure, as I said, is that you find the solidarities that you were yearning for. It's a sort of weird, there's something paradoxical about it, because it also then confirms the beauty of the culture as well that you're part of and that you live in and that you grew up with.
Yeah, yeah.
But collectively, you're in a moment where you're pitched at the horizon, where you want to go. And at some level, that's why it's so painful and so wrong, this sort of like language of hate marches or however this movement has been mischaracterized, like the ground on which people gather, whether it's been for protest or for events or for all of the difficulty that we've had to face, has been largely speaking that. And it's even hard to describe what that particular humanity fighting with a social conscience gathered. And the beauty of it gathering people of all backgrounds, of all ages, of all, yeah. I guess it's, and of course, as you say, you take that into your work, you take that into the territory in which you work. But as I said, like I started working, I graduated in 2003, the year of the war in Iraq, just after 9/11. What was the world telling me at that time?
Yeah.
And what was it telling me throughout my childhood before then? As you may know, amongst the other things, I've written a play which is touring the world at the moment and going around, and it's called Nowhere. And it's called Nowhere for a reason. And amongst the things I say at some point in the play as well, is I have been trained to accept the unrelenting slaughter of Arab bodies throughout my life. And not just Arab bodies. It's not to exceptionalize it, but that's where you return to no one is free until everyone is free.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I can really feel into that kind of the like bittersweetness in so many ways of the deep trauma of the violence and the erasure and harm towards Arab communities, and especially in regards to what's been happening in Gaza over the last couple of years and what that has brought to light.
And just because it feels needs to be said, and I'm not even Palestinian.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
I'm not one of those people that's lost upwards of 40, 60 members of their family or however many it is.
Totally. And I feel it's been a huge sacrifice for the Palestinian people, not just over the last couple of years, but obviously over decades of occupation. And what has brought to light over the last couple of years, and for me as someone that recognised how much manufactured consent there has been over the decades and the kind of perpetuating narratives towards Arab identity and Arab community. And I'm really feeling into the pain of that you have said in terms of parts of you that you've had to exile in many ways or push away, but then also this, with all of the climate of what it is, I recognise within myself, there has been such an interest from me and people I know to understand about Arab culture and to understand about Islam and to understand about the multifaceted culture within the Middle East. And I guess within that, somebody who is of an Arab identity, there is potential beauty that you've just shared within that, and a healing nature to that, and a collaborative nature to that, and how those aspects sit alongside of kind of the trauma of that, and now the shift that is potentially happening. I suppose that's what I'm hearing in your share of holding both of those two things together. Then actually almost like the more that comes to the forefront, the more that those parts of yourself or the parts that you've had to push away also come forward. Is that, I'm not sure if I'm putting that kind of correctly.
Absolutely. I think I love being an Arab. It's something that I am deeply proud of. And I also feel that there is a kind of a responsibility on my generation, or all of the generations really that are alive right now, and specifically I think in relation to Palestine, but also more broadly speaking, I'm of the 2011 Egyptian revolutionary generation, which is a very specific one in terms of our age and our experience. And I feel it relates to it relates to Palestine, but also in relation to Palestine, it's taken 77 years of Nakba to get to this moment of global consciousness.
Yeah.
And the depth of that struggle, and this moment that we're in now, which there cannot be any going back from. They may attempt to push the genocide away and pretend that it never happened, but as we know from all of the genocides of history, they haunt until they have received justice, until there has been accountability, until they have been culturally absorbed. And generationally, those of us who are in this space of consciousness, I think, have a responsibility over these next 10 years to do the work that makes meaning of this. You'll know more about this than me in terms of the kind of relationship with grief and how it turns to meaning. There is this yearning for it as a stage. But beyond that, it's the political, organizational work. You talked about the parts that were exiled that you then have to integrate into yourself, and then you have to find ways to include them into your future.
Yeah.
And that becomes a collective endeavor. And it's not easy because the world around you is always pointing to what seems the easy route over there. Just forget it. Just let it pass. There's nothing much you can do, but there is. And what I keep finding is that when you follow that path, the one that you're actually deeply yearning for, you begin to feel more whole, and you have more wholesome relationships with the people around you and as a society.
Yeah.
We are facing unprecedented crises. I don't know what percent, it's upwards of 70% of the world's regimes are authoritarian, and that seems to be on the rise. Not to mention climate catastrophe, not to mention multiple genocides, not one genocide. So it's deeply challenging. But as I keep saying, for me, I would rather live, even if I fail, I would rather live in the space of having tried and the beauty of what I find amongst other people as I do, and what that sends as a message to future generations, because it's the message I've received from previous generations, right? The people I revere and that inspire me are the ones that took those kinds of stands in history and were smeared and were imprisoned and were all sorts of things. And we have one precious life, each of us, and we have the choice to align with that or to find our way. And for me, that alignment as well, I think it's always important to say, it doesn't need to be big, huge, and it certainly never needs to start big and huge. I think there's an incremental nature to that every individual knows in relation to themselves. But they know if they're being honest in relation to how they stretch into that space of freedom, essentially, which is what it is. Yeah, and finding that path together.
Yeah. I think you've just touched on so many important aspects of the time through which we're living. Firstly, this being in integrity with ourselves and trying, as you said, we either try or we don't try, and to have this perspective of what can I do or what's the point type thing versus just doing what we can and going on a journey ourselves. I love how you brought that in too, and recognizing where we are free and not free, where our mind, where our heart, where our soul is ruled by, and how we continue to learn and unlearn. And also the community aspect that you mentioned. I was sharing with some people on Friday that I always thought I knew what community looked like and felt like. But actually, in the last couple of years, with me becoming involved with much more solidarity than I've ever been used to, I've stepped into a lot of different spaces that I previously didn't inhabit, and how diverse my community has become, and how eclectic and beautiful and collaborative, and how much that has changed me as a person in so many constructive ways. And I remember when myself and my husband came to see your panel at Glastonbury Festival, the one that was just organised very quickly, and it was yourself and Ben Jamal and Owen Jones was there, and Tori as well. And I remember that you'd all been speaking to the things that we have all lost during this time in with speaking out and what that can look like and feel like. But then you very rightly said, actually, let's also just focus on what we've all gained, which I say tentatively because I recognise the enormous sacrifice and the violence of what created that. But actually, what solidarity and community has started to look like over the last couple of years and how that has rippled out in lots of ways. I recognise that there is so much hope and possibility within that, as you've just spoken to.
Yeah, and it's what we were talking about, that solitude right at the beginning, the aloneness. Part of the way that repressive regimes work is to make you feel alone.
Yeah.
Is to make you think that if I step out in relation to this, I will not find anyone to support me, and I will not have anyone who has my back, and I will not find... And that's what you're describing there is what also redoubles the importance of living true to that. Yeah. Sense of that community, that solidarity, that real solidarity that has built between people in a struggle for a just cause. This is the first time in my life that I have felt that community in this country. And I want to hold on to it. I want to hold on to it. Part of what I'm finding very difficult about this moment, again, is it's like the threat of that going away.
Yeah.
And working out, insofar as we are moving in maybe to different circumstances or a different rhythm. So then how do we then have to adapt collectively? What structures do we need to build? What organizations do we need? What work now becomes possible that wasn't possible because we've all been firefighting over these last 2 years? And how that relates to people's sense of burnout. And also their own sense of, I'm sure everyone has had this, things I certainly do, things that have been on hold or things that I've not been able to give attention to as much as I would like to, or rhythms that I would like to have been. And I find each shift really but I've understood this again because I've been going through it for years since my revolutionary experience in Egypt. So much tumult. And we all have. COVID, rise of the far right onwards, like everyone has been. The world of intersecting crises is it's crazy everywhere, right? But anyway, I've understood about myself that whenever one of those shifts happen, I find it hard to work out how to readapt.
Yeah.
And how to reconfigure my sense of self, which is in community, which is not something that I hold just in myself. Part of what my play is, at some level, is an attempt, I call it an anti-biography, but part of it is it's an attempt to exorcise the kind of neoliberal individualism that we all grew up in. And this kind of idea of how everything is on the individual, and if you haven't done it, you're a failure, and you should be able to write your own path, and all of these kinds of things. As opposed to seeing how we're all constructed by the structures that are around us, by the cultural histories that are inside that. And as you unravel these things, where do they lead you? Anyone who works in therapeutic modes understand that obviously very deeply, but it's just as true in history as it is in economics, as it is in all sites of intellectual endeavor. And as we face, I also feel like I'm entering another heartland of my life. The Egyptian revolution happened 15 years ago in January. That's when it started. It's easy for me to map my relationship with this genocide as a major sort of rupture of feeling over these next 15 years, which will take me, I'm 44 now, I'll be 59 then. And so also, what does that say about what I want? And whoever's watching this, and what these next 15 years of their life mean. And also when I look to my children, who are 8 and 9 now, and who they will be. And my first demonstration was when I was 3 on my dad's shoulders. Their first demonstration was at a similar age for the same cause, Palestine. And the first speech I gave in Trafalgar Square when I was invited to stand was to speak. I said, I do not wish that to be their future. I don't want them to be standing where I am, speaking to their children. And so collectively, what does that mean for all of us in relation to the causes that are closest to us, all of which are in crisis, as we're in this world of billionaire autocracies and democratic deficits and the rise of the far right and the crises that are fueling the deep polarization that is everywhere. Where do you find yourself in that? Because what's clear is going like this and going, it's just going to go away, it's just going to go away. It's just going to go, it doesn't work. It's not working. And I don't want to privilege our consciousness because you've got to feel into the breadth of that consciousness because it's telling you something. The person who I disagree with most is telling me something about the world that I have to work out how to attune to and listen to what's underneath to try and understand how to unravel it and make that space, which we have examples from history of causes where there are deep wrongs that we have been doing to each other, whether it's the civil rights movement or the apartheid or whether it's genocide or whether it's slavery or whatever it is, or whether it's women's rights or workers' rights. We have the examples of, no, if you keep going, eventually this becomes something that everyone accepts. One day, everyone will have always been against this. But to walk that in community is a different experience. And I think it's the most beautiful invitation. But yeah, it's unwieldy. It is not linear. And its lack of linearity is frustrating.
When you were talking about that kind of either we can close ourselves off or open ourselves up, and we all have to go on a journey with that for ourselves. I'm curious whether for you in the last couple of years, you have discovered something about yourself that is unexpected or that has surprised you in some kind of way.
So much. The last 2 years have been a big shift for me, which I feel I've been working at for a long time. And so to feel like I have arrived to some of those shifts and still feel I'm at the beginning of a journey is quite something. I mean, on a very simple level, I never thought I'd record a song and put it out into the world and that would become part of my identity. That's a very simple thing. But that doesn't capture it. In this time, I also performed the first play that I've written, put it out into the world. And it's being received very positively, and it's going around the world. And I'm going to Sydney in New Zealand with it, and other places I've been invited, and I've been Geneva, Dublin, Edinburgh, and it'll be back in London. But for me, at some level, it comes down to the reality of those solidarities, and that's not a surprise. It is beautiful, and living more intensely for that is the challenge that I wake up with every day. And it's not an easy one. It's not an easy one. And I'm trying to learn how to live that with the right stamina, which also means a relationship with play. It means having space for everything that is beautiful in life and in the panoply of it. Today happens to be a hard day, but I have lived the rhythm multiply. And that's really where I draw my kind of encouragement, is the intimacy of that, of witnessing how something small that seemed like it might not go anywhere, in living true to it, resulted in things of a scale I never could have imagined. And watching that pattern repeat itself again and again in little moments through to the scale of what became possible. Witnessing the journey, an easy one because it's easy but witnessing the journey of Together for Palestine from the moment of its complete. I wasn't there right at the very beginning, but I know the story of it right at the beginning of it as a seeming pipe dream, impossible, through to the reality of watching people enter the room, and then hundreds of millions of people across the world, witnessing how important the protest that took place on November the 11th, where it's the anniversary, isn't it? 2023, where there was all that cultural fight about the whole idea of that protest and how it affected me, because that happened to be the same time I was going out on to the red carpet 2 years ago. And the way in which these things flow through to, as I said, the Film Workers Pledge, and the countless other letters that started as small things that became huge things, or witnessing the judgment at the ICJ through to the global moment of consciousness about it, and where hopefully that will lead. With my play, I recently told the story before, and many people have heard it in other places, but it's always worth telling again. So when I went to Dublin, I went to the Dunnes store where Mary Manning refused to sell the grapefruit because it was made in South Africa, and she participated in the boycott. And that grapefruit, years later, resulted in Ireland becoming the first country to boycott Israeli goods until apartheid ended. And it was the refusal to sell the grapefruit that resulted a few years later in Desmond Tutu on his way to receive his Nobel Peace Prize, coming and taking a photo with her that ramped up with her and the other strikers, up the scale of how they were being seen, and resulted in that historic moment for Ireland. Yeah. There are these moments around us all the time. And you never know which one is the one that people will remember, or the one that becomes the story that people tell. But the way they feed each other. What was the moment that led to Mary Manning thinking, oh, when I get that grape, I'm going to refuse? And and I see that everywhere. And it gives me hope. It gives me hope that's a journey that we are collectively able to live true to as we face this particular moment. It gives me faith as I know the memory of these last 2 years and the journey that people have been on in relation to this genocide is collectively set within our world. That then leaves on your heart and in your soul. What do I do now in relation to that? What do I do as I face the rest of however long life is going to give us?
I think that's such a powerful question to leave it with. I know that we're at time. I know that we are way over time, actually. So I'm conscious. I was going to ask you about hope and possibility and what you wanted to invite people into. And actually, you just read my mind, because that was exactly what you said.
Exactly.
You know, it's such a powerful question to keep asking ourselves and recognize. I always have to remind myself that in 20 years' time, we'll look back at this moment, and this will be a real moment in history where we are deciding who we are going to be individually and collectively. And I love what you also shared about how so much of your past has almost brought you to this moment where you feel like you're at the beginning of something, but how it's taken to get here as well. And I deeply resonate with that.
Absolutely.
It feels like I've gone on a huge journey just to get to here, and how much my life has changed in the last couple of years, in the last year, in the last 6 months. Actually, we were speaking over voice note the other day of how much everything is changing. At the moment, a day feels like a week, and a week feels like a month, and a month feels like a year. How quickly things are changing. And I think it's a really important thing to keep reminding ourselves of steps forward and what can we keep doing. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared today.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing it as well, and your rawness and vulnerability of
Thank you. Yes, exactly. And rest in peace, Homo, and you beautiful soul. Thank you for everything you've given me and given so many people around the world.
Yeah, I'm pleased that we could bring him into our conversation today and honour him in that way as well. And condolences to all that loved and were touched by him and his work too. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show, all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.